Hey everyone, welcome back to ASM Track Tips. My name's Tomo Gorman from Tomo Coaching, and in this video we're talking about Pikes Peak International Raceway. Not the hill climb, but the oval and road course, just a couple of miles away in Fountain, Colorado. It's 9 corners total, and it's one of the staples of the Rocky Mountain Motorsports area. It's actually one of 3 tracks out in Denver area, but it's definitely gotten a lot more attention in the last couple of years thanks to the Grid Life Alpine Horizon Festival. So let's jump into some tips for Pikes Peak International Raceway. So here we have our overhead map of Pikes Peak International Raceway, and we'll go ahead and start the lap off. As you can see, it is a roval, which is pretty unique for most people who don't get to drive courses like this all the time. But we're starting up on the front straightaway, which is super wide up here on the banking. So you have a ton of space to cover, and I would recommend being right about where the dotted painted line up at the top is, especially as you come in towards the entry of Turn 1, which counts as all NASCAR Turn 1 and 2 all the way through here. Now the front straightaway here is at a mild bank, and then it increases in banking all the way to the middle of the corner right here at the apex, and then decreases in banking as you track back out. So what that means is the car is actually gaining grip all the way down to the middle of the corner, and then is losing grip through the remainder of the corner as you get back up onto the back straightaway. And the only trick with that is you really are able to carry so much speed that you can't make any real sudden moves. You're not coming into the corner and braking hard. You're not going to have a specific turn-in point. It's all about flowing the speed, just rolling off the throttle as you come in. And really, if you have to brake at all, just super light brake pressure and rely on the scrub and the grip of the car to kind of carry you through this corner. Now, one trick you can use as you work your way through the banking is for oval driving schools and driving experiences. They actually have little lanes marked in white paint all the way around the entire oval circuit. And if you just kind of place your car through those gates, they basically work as gates you drive through the middle of. If you drive through the middle of those, you're generally doing fine. So use your first couple laps to kind of find where those gates are, and that'll help you start to establish your muscle memory for where you need to place the car as you go through this banking. But in general, you're just going to start high above the dotted line here on the entry, slowly work the car down to the middle, and then the bottom, down here at the apex in the middle of the 2 corners, and then right back up to the wall by the time you get back out. So it's pretty straightforward. The only thing to worry about in Turn 1 here is a giant bump that has developed right over the tunnel here at the apex of Turn 1. So you would drive into the track under this tunnel here into the paddock. Right at that tunnel is where there's a huge bump now. And there's really no avoiding it. If you go above halfway up the track, you can avoid the bump, but that's slow. So you're just going to have to hit it and kind of get used to what it does to the car. What I've found is if you can angle the car just slightly downward as you cross, meaning down this way, kind of late apexing the bump, it seems to minimize it, essentially coming at it from above. If you cross it center or if you cross it from below and are already tracking out, it seems to exaggerate that bump. So again, there's nothing you can do about it, just live with it, but if you can approach it from above, just ever so slightly, that'll help you out. Lastly, because this banking is kind of unique to most people's experiences on road courses, it can feel very uncomfortable as you're starting to track back out and losing that grip that you've gained through the banking. This wall will come up a little quicker than you expect your first couple laps. So I would recommend keeping your eyes low, meaning look at the bottom of the track up here towards Turn 2. If you're mentally paying attention to the wall or visually paying attention to the wall, you're going to get closer to it and it's going to make you nervous. Just look down to the bottom of the track and keep your speed up. So now we've come out of the banking, we're going to work our way down into the interior road course. And Turn 2 is essentially just a braking point for Turn 3. This is not a corner in itself. You'll just come from the wall and kind of aim straight through Turn 2. But again, it is the braking zone for Turn 3, which is a pretty good hairpin down here. What I find is this apex curve that sticks out right here tends to be a really good braking point to get into Turn 3. And some cars will be able to brake a little past it, others will have to brake just before it, but use this inside curve, this apex curve at Turn 2, as a good braking reference once you get down to Turn 3. So now we're approaching Turn 3, and this is the highest speed entry on the track. It's your top speed right before you brake, and it is essentially the slowest corner on the track. This track map doesn't necessarily show it as well, but we'll put a Google Maps image here, and you can see how this corner is actually an increasing radius corner, which means you have to slow down really nicely before the corner, and then you can attack the exit. If you start to attack the entry here too much, you're risking just kind of flying off the outside of the track or using too much distance, which is going to ruin your run down the straight between turns 3 and 4. So again, think of this corner as a corner that you sacrifice your entry a bit and really attack the exit because it's increasing radius. So we'll have the car coming down the right side of the track, having broke for Turn 2, all the way out on driver's right. Again, really try not to rush this turn-in point. You're going to be baited to turn in early because it feels like it's going to be so tight. But really, if you hang just a little bit wider, turn in a little bit later, it's going to be a very central apex right here on this curb. And then right towards that central apex, you can pick up the power and start to maximize that increasing radius nature to track out all the way out to this outside curb. You should really hit the outside curb right where it starts. From this access road that comes right here. If you're tracking out any later than that, you probably underutilize the acceleration zone off the corner. Now it's important to maximize our exit out of turn 3 because technically the straight between turns 3 and 4 is actually the second longest straightaway on the track. So this is a really key acceleration zone after we've tracked out of turn 3. You'll get a nice good run. Take your time working your way back over to driver's left here on this straightaway. And right about here is an access road that is a great braking and turn-in marker for you to use. Most cars will brake just before or kind of at that access road that's going to be on your left here. And as soon as you reach that access road is actually about the time to start guiding the car across the track and turning in for the corner. Now turn 4 drives very much like a skid pad. It's just cut the distance out of it. It's completely flat in elevation. There's no bumps. There's nothing really to throw you off. And there's no straightaway coming out of it really. So it's not worth setting up for a late apex. It's not worth wasting any distance. Just start to turn the car in at that access road. You'll have a little bit of trail brake and then just, again, skid pad this corner, cut the distance out of it, and keep the car on its lateral load limit. One trick I find helpful here in turn 4 is an inside curb that runs all the way through the corner. Some cars, most cars that I've driven here anyway, can hook the inside right on the inside of this curb and kind of pull the car through the corner. So if you can climb that inside curb with the right front and just get it on the inside edge to kind of hook you through the corner, your car should be able to maximize just a little bit more G-load through this corner. If your car's not as compliant maybe, or if you get it kind of a weird angle, it might bounce the car out. So play with it a little bit. If it's feeling like it's just not repeatable for you, then don't bother. But again, most cars seem to be able to hook that inside right through the corner and get a little bit of speed out of it. The last trick with these long skid pad corners is to make sure you're looking ahead. You want to always be finding the furthest point out of your windshield that you possibly can. Even look through the passenger window if you can turn your head. And we're really looking through turn 5. So as you get through the middle of turn 4, have your head cranked all the way around, be looking down this straightaway, and you'll see the acceleration opportunity open up as it comes. Now once you get that accelerator starting to feed in power, you want to track out using all of the extra runoff here on the exit of turn 4. It's actually paved a couple of car widths out to a wall about here. So you can run completely wide, but I think that adds too much distance. The sweet spot seems to be running your right side tires straight out to the white line. So your entire left side of the car is off the track, but your right side tires are just on the white line that tracks you out of turn 4 towards turn 5. Now that we've tracked out of turn 4, we have our car just barely on the track, and we're going to aim straight through turn 5. Turn 5 is more of an acceleration and braking zone for turn 6 than it is a corner in itself. If you've tracked out of turn 4 well enough and aggressively enough, you should be able to kind of draw this straight line that you can see with my marker very quickly through turn 5. The only other way I can think to say that is you're trying to late apex right here at the end of the curb that's on your inside of turn 5. So once you've got that lined up straight, now you're accelerating heavily towards turn 6. Now we come into the most technical section of Pikes Peak International Raceway, which is linking turns 5, 6, 7, and 8. And it becomes extra technical because there's a bunch of curb action through this section that we can really use the curbs aggressively, but it makes it a little tough to repeat. So we want to make sure that we're paying very close attention to our car placement through here. We've accelerated through turn 5. We're aimed straight at the inside of turn 6. And as we approach turn 6, we're going to brake just enough to put the weight on the front axle and give ourselves some grip. And we're really going to turn in aggressively towards turn 6. Now on the inside here, we have a curb that's about an entire car width wide. We want our right side tires on the top of that curb. Yes, the right side, not the left side. We want our entire left side of the car off the track, the right side tires on the top of this flat curb. And we're going to straighten out turn 6 as much as we possibly can. It's going to feel crazy, but if you just put your left side tires on this curb and keep your right sides on the track, you're adding a whole car width of distance. That curb's going to push you out to this direction rather than help you wrap through the corner. And it also is hitting the curb more aggressively, believe it or not, than if you were to just pound over this curb. So the turn 6 curb, yes, it is not mechanically sympathetic, and yes, it feels a little crazy, but you got to pound over this curb to maximize this lap. The thing to keep in mind about this curb, last thought, is it is flat on the top. So it rises up, is flat, and then rises back down. You got to get your right side tires on that flat portion. One thing that will help, because this is such an aggressive curb hop, the car is doing a lot from side to side. There's a lot of transitional weight happening here. You really want to have steady pedals. If you're accelerating hard, or especially if you're braking over this curb, it's going to make the whole car oscillate, and it's going to upset forward to back and side to side. If you can just keep a steady state throttle, just a nice maintenance throttle across the curb here at turn 6, it's going to at least settle the car down front to rear, and then the only oscillation you're dealing with is side to side. So we've done our quick tap of the brakes at turn 6, we've thrown the car over this curb, and then we have a little bit of a braking opportunity to slow down again for turn 7. Should be aimed at about this angle as we come through turn 6. And as the wheel gets straight, coming off of this curb, as soon as the car lands and settles, it's a good hard brake to slow the car down. Now on the inside of turn 7, we also have a giant curb here that again rises and is flat on top. We want to get our right side tires all the way on the top of that curb, all the way to the grass even. We're using every inch of that curb on the inside of turn 7, and our left side tires will be just on the inside of the track. If you stay off this curb, once again, you don't have any of that curb to help you kind of hook through the corner, and you're adding a car width of distance. So use all of this inside curb at turn 7, having slowed the car just enough to kind of climb up on top of it and ride the top of it all the way through the corner. Now that we've ridden the curb through the inside of turn 7, we have a decent little acceleration off to turn 8. And the trick here is to set up nice and naturally for turn 8. You don't want to exaggerate anything too much, either by setting up too wide and then going for a late apex, and you certainly don't want to drive straight at the apex for turn 8. So try to minimize any back and forth, just kind of let the car track out of 7, might be just to the middle of the track, just a bit right of center here, and then we'll turn back in for turn 8. Now turn 8 is super critical to the lap because it leads up onto the banking, which in most cars is very close to or completely flat out for about 50% of the lap. So it's a huge corner to get off of turn 8. And the trick here is it's a fairly central apex. There's no need to exaggerate a late apex. You really don't want to come in too early. Just kind of get down to the center of this inside curb here and get back on the power. Now luckily you do have this banking on track out to catch the car. So if you hit this center apex and you realize that you're going to be tracking out pretty wide, it's generally okay. You can just kind of let the car come up the banking, and that banking will catch you as well. But you should be able to find kind of a sweet spot with your muscle memory of coming off of turn 7, just kind of getting the car to the middle of the track and naturally turning back down to a central apex here at turn 8. Now, we've been pounding the curbs from turns 5, 6, 7. Turn 8, we do not want to touch the inside curb. The only thing that it can really do is toss the car out to the outside, in my experience, no matter how aggressively you use it. So just try to come up right next to it so that you're not throwing your rhythm off coming up onto the banking through turns 8 and 9. So now that we've gotten through the center of turn 8, we're feeding power or flat out. You really want to find the sweet spot of distance and power up onto the banking. This banking again is super wide. You can probably park 10 cars across it wide. So you really want to just kind of use the bottom, in my experience, or draw as straight a line as you can across the bottom here before tracking out to the outside to open up the entry of turn 1. So that should more or less complete a lap of Pikes Peak International Raceway. So now we're hopping on board a car to take a lap of Pikes Peak International Raceway. And this is ASM's Trainer 1. It's the kind of OG K24 S2000, a little over 200 horsepower. It's on Hoosiers with some very mild aero. It's a pretty straightforward track build that was racing in Grid Life Touring Cup. So coming up onto the banking here across the start-finish line soon, you can see we're worked our way up to about the dotted line and crossing the start-finish line down towards turn 1, sticking right about that dotted line and then slowly working the way down into the turn 1. Now this car is flat out, so you really just have to time the banking and the bump, but more than anything else, you're just kind of hanging on and letting the car track back out to the wall with as minimal steering input as possible. But now down into turn 2, braking just past the inside curb, deep on the brakes, and again, trying not to turn in too early. We're going to roll our speed central apex and then tracking out nice and early to be able to maximize this short straightaway between turns 3 and 4. Working our way back along the left side of the track, and our access road on the left should be a good turn-in point. Down to the inside, and again, skid pad corner, hooking the right side tire through that inside curb if you can. Tracking all the way, just barely keeping the car on the track on exit. Now we're going to aim straight through turn 5 and dive over the curb at turn 6. Watch this, right side's on the curb, left side's completely over, then right side's up on the inside curb for turn 7. Not too much back and forth between turn 7 and 8. Another central apex at turn 8, and really on the power early, using a lot of the banking in this car to maximize the exit of turn 8 and 9 to get back up and complete a lap of Pikes Peak International Raceway. So those are my tips for PPIR. As you can see, pretty short and sweet, but a couple of nuances here and there. That brings us to our track scores, and first we're going to start with fun factor. I'm just going to give it a 3 on fun factor. It's not necessarily my style of track. I know some people who really love it. The banking's pretty fun, but the bump is scary. Otherwise, the infield is kind of 3 hairpins to me. So it's definitely not in my top 5 as far as most fun, but every racetrack is fun, right? Next up, we have our risk factor, and I'm going to give it a 6 on the risk factor, mostly because of the banking. You got to be willing to obviously exploit the extra physics that centripetal force gives you. The infield, you're not necessarily going to risk hitting much. There's nothing there to really mess up, but the banking's a little risky. And finally, our technicality, I'm going to give it a 4. As I mentioned, it's kind of just the banking and 3 hairpins to me once you really get the nuance of jumping the curbs. And more than anything, you kind of have to be willing to beat on your car a little bit more so than really dive into the technical aspect of driving. If you're really going to jump over those curbs, push the bump on the banking, things like that. So technicality, 4. So that brings my overall score for PPIR to a 3. It's not necessarily my favorite racetrack to drive. It's pretty simple and straightforward, but I do want to throw out there that the people who run this track and a lot of the events that come to this place are a ton of fun, and they're super nice people. So just because it maybe isn't my favorite racetrack to drive when I'm on the surface, doesn't mean that it's not a ton of fun to go visit. So that's it for Pikes Peak International Raceway. We do offer driver coaching packages here at ASM and at Tomo Coaching, and a whole lot more. So if you want to look into that, visit us on our website. But otherwise, I hope you found that video helpful, and thanks for watching.